Well, we will get started and just let others join us as they arrive and as they may. So, good morning. I'm Leonardo McClarty. I'm president of the Howard County Chamber, and would like to welcome each of you to our monthly Biz Breakfast through our GovConnects program. And so, for those of you that perhaps are new to GovConnects and new to the Chamber, excuse me, our GovConnects program is our business to government initiative, and the Biz Breakfast is where we typically will bring in various agencies to talk about business opportunities, procurement opportunities, what their goals are, et cetera, all with the purpose of allowing you the ability to hopefully have a leg up as it relates to meeting your business development goals and objectives. And so today we are extremely excited to have with us CMS, who will be talking about the do's and don'ts of doing business with them. And we have Anita Allen, who was their small business specialist, as well as also Nathaniel Barbato, who also works in the small business office as well. And so we will be getting started in just a few, but in the interim, I want to just bring to your attention the screen, which is rotating through, and our upcoming events, but also want to just recognize our annual partners that help to support the GovConnects program. And so you'll see their logos and things come through, beginning with Tower Federal Credit Union, Uninet, Aronson, Creatrix, Edwards Performance Solutions, also Phoenix, TS, as well as also Prescott HR. And then you'll see the others that specifically support the Biz Breakfast, and Katz Abosh and Polera Matza. And so again, we're extremely thankful for our annual partners. And so with that, also I did mention HR as well. So with that, I am going to now prepare to stop sharing the screen and get ready to turn things over to our representatives from CMS. And I think, Anita, as I recalled earlier, I believe you said that Nathaniel was going to go first?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. And so, again, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Nathaniel Barbato, and I'm going to ask if there are questions, if you would actually use the Q&A as opposed to the chat. And Mike Finkel, who's the CEO of SparkSoft, is going to assist us in moderating those questions as well. And so I guess, Nathaniel, as we've become fond of saying, the screen is yours.
Thank you. Just gonna click a couple things so that everybody can see my presentation. Anita, give me a thumbs up if you can see the presentation full screen. Thank you. And if anybody can't hear me, just let me know and I'll try to speak up a little. Thank you for the introduction. I'm a contracting officer. Hold on just a second.
Get started. Just say, what's Marshmallow's thought of the day?
Sorry about that. Amazon Alexa was talking in the background. So I'm a contracting officer in the Division of Information Systems Contracts. And so part of this will be, I'm going to go over a brief overview of phased procurements and down select, and then open it up to questions at the end. Like I said, I'm in the Division of Information Systems Contracts, and so a lot of my examples will be IT related mostly. So with that, I'll go ahead and jump in. Just a second. Okay, so the main purpose of the phased multi-phase procurement is to narrow the number of responses to review in the final proposal evaluation phase. And a lot of this is based on information that you can find on the internet at the HH Buyers Club. Department of Homeland Security put together the Procurement Innovation Lab. And if you search online, you're looking for the PIL Boot Camp workbook. And that has a really good overview and a lot of good information that discusses the phased procurement down select in more detail. Also, you can find a lot of good information through the US Digital Services. So there's two types. One is advisory and one is mandatory. The advisory is what you'll see most often, and that's where you'll do your first phase. You'll get a notification, and it will say either we advise that based on the competition you don't continue on to the next phase, or it'll say based on the competition we think you're a good competitor, a good fit, and we advise you to continue on to the next phase. And then the mandatory would be basically a wall. It would say you're not permitted to go on. So one is the vendor's choice, and one is a mandatory exclusion from the next phase. So the benefits of this approach, it's a low initial investment for industry and vendors. Typically, you'll have some one or two, mostly one evaluation factors in the first phase, and it won't be a heavy lift. And the idea is to save the larger, like the price proposal and some of the more in-depth evaluation criteria to be presented in the second phase. That way you'll save time and money going on if you choose not to continue. So you get a good indication of whether you're going to be a good fit in the first phase, and you can make that business decision going forward. Another benefit is reducing the length of the initial paper proposal. And the detail, like I said, is in the second phase, such as cost and price or in-depth technical approach. There is a distinction. Competitive range determination is a very specific term in FAR 15. Down select decisions are not a competitive range decision and shouldn't be treated as such. And then this also reduces the number of post-award debriefings. So the main benefit is it's a lighter lift for both industry and government. Typical examples of phase one evaluation factors would be relevant corporate experience or past performance. Those are the lighter lift. And then typical phase two for IT will be an oral presentation. And you could do that in several different ways. You can really present on any factor, but it'll be detailed in the specific instructions of that solicitation. You could also do a solutioning exercise or challenge questions. Another evaluation factor is the performance work statement, and that would be based on the statement of objectives, qualifications of staff, and a solutioning exercise. And this could, like I said, either be oral or written. And the idea of this is basically a show me type of response where you're giving your solution, whether it's a software application, and going over that and some measure of the technical aptitude, quality, problem solving, and following instructions. And then of course the business proposal, which will have your costs and your rates. Another example could be a concept paper or relevant experience in the first phase, and then in the second phase, you could have your management plan, staffing, considerations for socioeconomic factors like business size, and then your product accessibility template and how well you accommodate 508 compliance, and then business proposal. So I've done a few of these phase down selects. I'm by no means an expert yet, still a lot of learning, but there's some lessons learned. It's important to have clear and concise solicitations. I think I heard a quote one time. It said, sorry for the 10-page response. I didn't have time to give you 3 pages. So it's about simplicity, effectiveness, and don't ask for more than you need. And that really has a lot of time associated with it up front in the planning phase to give effective, clear instructions and concise that will help us differentiate and be effective in making a source selection decision. So there's some distinctions and subtleties between the concept paper, the challenge questions, and the design exercise. Hold on just a second. Sorry about that. So the concept paper is to help show understanding of what the government wants. So are you understanding the requirements and sort of giving us what we're asking for? Challenge questions, two ways we can do on the spot. So like in an oral proposal situation, you come in and we'll present the challenge questions as novel and see how you respond. The other is in advance. So you could see in the instructions one or of those options. And we're really looking for people and processes in those challenge questions. The design exercises, it's a measure of quality a lot. So we need the technical people to look at whether it's code, see if there's a lot of technical debt, or otherwise a quality measure. So that's the brief overview. If there's any questions, we'll try to respond as best we can.
Can I ask Nate a question?
Yes.
When you were talking about phase 1 and phase 2, as a small business specialist, I get asked a lot of questions where people submitted a concept paper and they didn't make it past there. And one of the things they often say is, you know, writing a concept paper and being able to effectively communicate what they're trying to tell you is somewhat difficult. Do you have any tips to small businesses that could help them in that step? Because their concern is if they don't make it past the first phase, is it worth their money and resources to even try to go, even though they said they didn't make it, they can still go to the second phase? Is there any tips to more effectively communicate to you in phase 1? Because the written word is challenging.
Yeah, I understand that that's a challenge. The Q&A sessions, I think, are very important when there's a concept paper evaluation criteria, because like I said, you have to try to parse out what the government is wanting. So not all the time it's in if you get a statement of objectives, you might have to ask a little more questions if it's not detailed like in a statement of work. But if there's a statement of work, read through that and ask very detailed, specific technical questions in the statement of work if something is unclear. Because a lot of times, and you can even ask, what are you trying to evaluate? If it's not clear in the, there's 2 sections of the instructions. One is what we want you to provide. The other section at below is what you'll be evaluated on. And if what you're being evaluated on doesn't seem clear enough, I would ask a lot of specific questions on that in the Q&A session. Because like I said, we're trying to figure out if you understand, if small businesses will understand what the government is asking for and what we want. And sometimes there's some subtleties in that. So if what we're evaluating in the instructions isn't completely clear, I would ask a lot of detailed questions in the Q&A session. And I think that's the best way to sort of try to get a picture of what is important in that evaluation factor.
Nathaniel, this is a question from the question and answer. And so the first one says it was mentioned about a handbook. And is this process exclusive to CMS? That's the first question.
It's not exclusive to CMS. It's sort of going wide. It's not a new concept. It's been around for a little while, but it's gaining popularity, especially in IT. But it's government wide. CMS, I think, is using it a lot lately. So I don't know the extent in other agencies, but I have heard about it and seen it in other agencies as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Nathaniel, I have actually a follow-up question, and there's a few questions here in the Q&A that I'll go through, but follow-up question to what Anita asked. So the problem on the contractor side is when they get an advisory versus, your stuff is no good, don't proceed. A lot of them will tend to proceed anyway, and it kind of defeats the purpose of saving the effort on the contractor side if the government is not giving them a clear picture that, what you're telling us is just not going to go anywhere. Don't waste your time versus, oh, maybe you can fix it or tweak it and then it will make sense. So I know the intent is to save time and effort on the contractor side and the small business side, but how do you do that without actually telling them, hey, your stuff that you gave us is really not what we're looking for versus we're advising you not to proceed, but proceed if you want to. It's kind of two different messages.
I think you'll get more detailed information depending on the CO you're working for or the intention of the advisory. And a lot of times, like you said, it's not necessarily that you did so poorly in phase one. It's that there's a couple competitors that have done really, really well. So to close that gap in the evaluation may be difficult. The advisory down selects that I do are usually pretty pretty clear as far as what I'm advising, and if it's a very very large gap, I might give more details in my advisory notification and sort of explain, this is a situation. If it's sort of the other way around, where you have really strong competitors and some middle of the road responses, then I might give a little less details and say, based on the competition, we don't think that you'll be able to close the gap or something like that. So I don't want to say that the advisory notifications are worthless, and there are certain subtleties, but typically if you get a lot of details in the advisory notification, I think it's a very clear indication that the gap is fairly large. However, I know that other COs don't provide any details in the phase one notification regardless. So it's difficult to rely on those subtleties. But as a general rule, I would say the advisory notifications are a good indication that there is a gap between the highest rated competitors. And so I would pay attention. I mean, if you have a very good solution and this is a good fit and you think you can wow the government in the next phase, then by all means, it's advisory notification, continue on to the next phase. But because I have had times where I've advised some competitors not to move on and they came in the next phase and they gave really good responses. So it's sort of a business decision, but I wouldn't necessarily take the advisory notifications lightly.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What portal does CMS use to post active and upcoming procurements?
There's several, are you talking about the forecast or posting the actual solicitation?
I think that posting actual solicitations.
Okay, so there's several depending on the strategy we use. So if we're using Spark, there's an email distribution list. So just send out emails to Spark. If we're using GSA, we'll use eBuy, or the GSA Stars 2 GWAC, we'll use eBuy. If it's a FAR 15 procurement, we can use the point of entry, the Fed BizOps. If it's NASA Soup, we use EGOS. And so it depends on the strategy and the acquisition vehicle you're using, but those are the most common ones, I would say, are the email distribution on Spark and eBuy for GSA.
Thank you. Next question actually is about the pipeline opportunities. And I know that CMS posts them online every month. Can you just note where people can find them?
Yeah, if you go to the CMS website and you search forecast of opportunities, you'll come to a page, and around the middle of the page, you'll see an Excel spreadsheet, and it'll say 2020 or whatever fiscal year it is, forecast of opportunities. While you're getting to the next question, I'll see if I can.
Nate, I can help with that.
Okay.
One of the attachments that I have that the chamber said they would send out to everyone has a link to that website, so you don't have to go finding it. So if the chamber is going to send this out to all the participants, I believe it's near the end of the info sheet, there is a link to that site.
Okay.
And
Anita,
I'll talk a little bit about that too.
Okay, that's what I figured. So we'll see that answer in Anita's, and we'll also be sending out everything to the attendees as well for reference. Thank you both. Next question for Nate. Does CMS disclose the number of competitors and names of the competition during the phases?
During the actual solicitation, they do not disclose between phase 1 and phase 2. If you go into phase 2 and you have a debriefing, we disclose the number of competitors. And also when we post in the federal data system, we will put in the number of competitors there as well. So there's two ways. If you don't go into, if you go to phase 2, you'll get the information in the debriefing. If you don't go to phase 2, you can search the federal data system and you can find that information there.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions we had in the Q&A. Thank you, Nate, for your time. And we'll move on to Anita's presentation.
Thank you.
Just 1 second.
And Anita, while we've finalized your presentation coming up, now I know you did send some materials over for me to share with the group following the presentation. And does that, and those handouts, does that also includes Nate's slides as well?
No, Mike has Nate's slides and Ronnie has Nate's slides, so.
Okay. Got it. Well,
I can share them with you after the fact.
Leonardo,
No,
we have
if
all
we-
the slides. I can share
yeah,
them.
I was going to say, yeah, if we have it, we're good. I was just wanting to make sure. So yeah, I did see another presentation, but I didn't know if it was just an updated one from yours. But no, that's great. And so I'm going to sign off and turn it back over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My presentation is like pulled from bits and pieces, so you might see some mistakes on slides, like on the first page. This was something that was presented to SBA. I understand that there is a mixture of people in the audience today. Unfortunately, I can't see you all. I do better at seeing people. So I'm going to have, for those mature companies, some of this will bore you. And some of this might be beyond you if you're a real newbie. So feel free to ask questions in the end. Those of you that don't know me, I'm a very straightforward person. No nonsense. I'm very direct, so I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. I'm not going to read a lot of these slides. You can go back and read this. This is, you know, the HHS mission and the OSTABU mission. I actually work for the Department of Health and Human Services. I support CMS as the small business specialist. I also am supporting part of the National Institute of Health, which includes the National Institute on Drug Abuse and the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. I'm still learning them. I'm not as familiar with them, but feel free to ask me questions at the end if you have questions about them also. This is just an organizational chart of how I report up. My office reports up to the secretary. And I get this question all the time. Who's under HHS? FDA is part of HHS, CMS is part of HHS, CDC. So I thought this would be helpful, especially to the newbies, to have as a reference. And these are just some of the key stats across the United States to show HHS's reach. This was the goal achievement, and this is HHS. This is not specific to CMS. CMS's small business goal last year was 16%. Their goal achievement was over 20%. CMS's goal for this year is 20%. Currently, as of, I believe, last week, they've already exceeded that. However, I will tell you, COVID-19 has thrown a wrench in a whole lot of things. And those of you that are tracking the forecasts are probably very aware of this. You've seen procurements disappear. Some have just gone away. Some have been pushed into the next fiscal year. These are the top NAICS codes specifically for HHS. These are some of the things that we buy the most. They are not specific to CMS. As you can tell, construction, CMS does not buy construction at all. What I recommend to you to do is to do a search on the budget in brief for both HHS and also CMS, to see where we are spending our money. A lot of questions are coming through now on COVID information. So this is some of the things that CMS is doing across the board. Not as much COVID money is really at CMS. There is a lot of COVID money at NIH for clinical trials and things like that. But I believe CMS got about $100 million. And a lot of that is not available to the average small business. A lot of it's going on current contracts. Again, this is CMS's goal for this year, not goal achievement, but this is what they're trying to achieve next year, and this fiscal year. And I will tell you that areas that are my priority that I'm trying to increase by at least 5% over last year's spend, my top priority is HubZone. As I mentioned earlier, COVID-19 has kind of thrown a wrench in this. That doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to get what I want. And when I say 5%, it's 5% over last year's spend. So I'm still working hard on my hub zone. My second priority is service disabled, and that's at both are these at CMS. And the reason for that is CMS has doubled for the last several years their small disadvantaged business goal, more than double. They have exceeded their woman-owned small business goal. They did slip slightly in fiscal year 18. They exceeded it in fiscal year 19. I anticipate they will exceed the woman-owned small business goal again this year. But right now, my focus is on hub zones. So those of you, and please don't call me and say, why hub zone? I'm a small business. Why? I'm a small disadvantaged business. I don't want to hear those calls. What is important for you as a small business is to network and have many different partners in all socioeconomic categories. Because yes, this may be CMS's priority, but maybe at FDA, small disadvantaged business is a priority, or maybe woman-owned small business. So you need partners in all categories so they can prime. And small businesses, we still have things that are going to be total small business set-asides. But we are charged with achieving those goals. And we get a report card every year from the Small Business Administration. And we do not like to get below an A. So some of this is about checking boxes, but it's also about making sure that we spread the wealth. There is a reason for all of these programs. And I totally believe in sharing the wealth. So you are going to see times where maybe I won't make you very happy because something's going service disabled or something's going hub zone, and you're just a small business and you're going to come to me trying to get me to push it the other way, and I'm not going to. And that's when you need to look for those partners in that category. This is some of the collaboration we do. I can tell you at CMS, I'm very fortunate. CMS actually involves me in acquisition planning. Not on everything, but this is the operating division that has been very proactive, including the small business office and procurements. Unfortunately, it's not 100%, but I'm working on that, maybe eventually before I retire one day. This is just some of how goals are accomplished. You know, like I said, early communication. I review procurements. There is some disagreement on what procurements I do review and which ones don't. I don't review. We are working at the department on procedures, guidance, and instructions to supplement policy to the FAR to give us a little more weight and a little more influence in how some of these procurements are planned and the outcome of the acquisition strategies. Market research, some of the things that I do, I have to educate program people and the contracting staff. And so I work on that in telling them the importance of market research on their end. And some of those methods are sources sought, the Small Business Dynamic Search Tool, and coming to us. They don't come to us quite as often, but sometimes they do. But with sources sought, what is really key is how you all respond to sources sought. And I wrote myself a couple notes so I would not forget. When you see a sources sought response, do not ever just submit your general capability statement. That upsets me tremendously, because it wastes programs' time, it wastes the contracting officer's time, and it wastes my time. Because when you submit those things, I still have to review them. And you know, and I know, when you submit general capability statements, you're going to find that you're not capable. You have to write a response that is specific to the sources sought notice. Do not parrot back the words that are in the sources sought notice. If it asks you for specific information, respond to that specific information. Forget the fluff. We do not care about fluff. Put in specifics. If you cannot answer in everything in the sources sought, you need to have partners. Unless the sources sought says only answer what you have, you know, what you can respond to. Occasionally, it will tell you only respond to what you can. But if it doesn't, and you need to respond to the whole thing, put your partner's capabilities in there and be very specific. One of the things when they're reviewing sources sought notice is if you're in compliance with the FAR clause 52.219-14, which is the limitation on subcontracting. That is key, because often what comes to me is, oh, well, it's apparent that they're depending almost totally on their partner, not on, they're not going to be able to prime this contract. So it must be clear in your response, and it must show that you are capable of priming this contract. If you have questions when the sources sought is posted, put those questions in writing to the CO. You can copy the small business specialist, but don't call me up and say, Anita, I have these questions. Don't call me up. Email the CO. They are the ones that have to answer the questions. Now, if you find that a sources sought is restrictive, or it's giving the appearance that they are trying to exclude small business, you need to let the small business specialist know, or the small business specialist at the organization that you are targeting. But when you say it's restrictive or it's excluding, you need to be specific and notate what it is in that document that you feel that way. We are not technical people. So you're going to have to keep it simple, explain it in elementary terms so that I or one of my colleagues can go back to the CO, to the program people, to fight the good fight, to ensure that we're maximizing opportunities for small business. Let me see what else. Okay, let me go to the next one. Also on this one, the SBA Procurement Center representative reviews acquisitions over the SAT that are not set aside for small business. Now, there is some question as to whether they review things that go on schedules, that go on NASA SOUP, that go on NITAC. We're still trying to work that out. It hasn't been challenged by SBA. SBA says they do need to review it. We'll see if they go to challenge any of HHS's procurements that bypass me and bypass them currently. But you need to know your procurement center rep. So for CMS and for HHS, excluding CDC, is Joshua Blow, and that's B-L-O-W, joshua.blow@sba.gov. So he is also an advocate for small business. I'm a liaison. He can stop procurements. It's important to know that. So if there's something I cannot help you with, then you might want to reach out to him. These are just some things that referring to streamline acquisitions and what part of the FAR. I'm not going to really go into that. I would suggest that you look at the FAR and know. And if you're new, you don't need to know the federal acquisition regulations. You just need to know how to go to them. You can even challenge the North Atlantic Industrial Classification Code that a contracting officer has identified on a particular procurement. I recommend that if you don't agree with the NAICS code, just email the CO and tell them why you don't agree with it. Be specific. A CO will not change a NAICS code because you're a small business in a different one and you want to compete for this. So that's something. NAICS codes can also be challenged and taken to the Small Business Administration. I mentioned in one of the previous slides, limitations on subcontracting. That's the citation. I do recommend taking a look at that and making sure when you're responding that you can comply. Draw attention to yourself, know the rules, and be prepared when opportunity knocks. There's a lot of ways. Knowing how many of you look at the Federal Register when things go out, proposed rules that you can do a comment on them, and just yell at me, Mike, if I'm going too far, because I'll go on and on.
No, you're fine. Keep going.
Okay. Be familiar with the FAR. Be familiar with the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 13, which is where the Small Business Act is. Know the National Defense Authorization Act. I believe I put some of these on future slides. Know where this information is so that you can use it as a resource. Draw attention to yourself. What makes you different? On your capability statements. We don't like a lot of fluff, but put in there how to get in touch with you, what contract vehicles you're on, certifications, ISO, CMMI, any other certifications we need to know. Examples of tailor your capability to the agency that you're targeting. So you'll have a general capability statement, but if you're targeting CMS and you've had an authority to operate, or you have CMMI level 3, CMMI level 4 in services and in development, that's important to CMS. So you want those types of things. I'm trying to think. You could even put references if you think it's important to the agency that you're targeting. Make sure your business cards also have your NAICS codes and they're writable. Don't make them fancy and fluff. We care about information on there. Use both sides. NAICS code certification, contract vehicles you're on. I think that pretty much covers that. When opportunity knocks, be on time. I can't tell you how many people show up late for meetings. And I know in this world now it's going to be in, in situations like we are today. Make sure you're on time. If you're hosting the Zoom, test it ahead of time so that if your CMS person comes to the meeting, they can actually access it. Know what kind of conferences are out there. The attachments that I'm that are going to be sent to you have a lot of conferences that CMS often attend, or meetings, HIMSS, AFCIA, the National Contract Management Association, the Woodlawn chapter, which I'm a member, and that chapter was started to focus directly on CMS. And, you know, whenever we are back to being around people, you know, I go to those events. That's how a lot of people are able to access me. But that chapter now is going to be doing webinars. There's a lot of other conferences that are now going to be doing webinars. So you need to look for those things and how you can learn more, how you can access those. When you reach out to people and you have an opportunity, ask them if they're open to conferences like this. Now, you know, as the environment is changing, it's new to a lot of people, and a lot of people are very busy and they're trying to get used to this. Maybe this will be the way we communicate in the future, but be patient, you know, be patient for now. Here's some legislative guidance. I talked about the Small Business Act, Title 13 of the Code of Federal Regulations. Here's some other regulatory guidance, specific sections in that code. These are two things, very, very long documents, but it's important to be familiar with these documents. NDAA often changes. That's the National Defense Authorization Act. A lot of times, different things are changed each year. So be aware of that and know what those changes are. Be prepared. These are just some of the things that you need to be prepared for. Nate talked about a lot of things going on contract vehicles. So when you're responding to sources sought notices, one of the things I thought about, and that's key, is sometimes they will ask you, what contract vehicle are you on? The reason for that, if you're on a contract vehicle, those procurements are easier to complete rather than putting it on FedBizOps or on Beta SAM. Excuse me one second. So if you think that they may use a contract vehicle, they don't always use e-buy. E-buy is not required. So unless they tell you they're definitely going to post on e-buy, my recommendation is this, that you put in writing that you are requesting a copy of the RFQ when it is posted, because they can actually, on the schedules, go to certain companies and not send a copy to you. So you have to formally, don't call me and ask me, email the CO and say, I am formally requesting a copy of the RFQ when it is posted. Get a read receipt. I will tell you, those that are familiar with the procurement, Acme or Dash, I believe they put in their requirements that they're posting on eBuy because they receive so many emails stating that you all wanted a copy of the RFQ. They came to me and put their hands up and they said, okay, we're going to post it on eBuy. So that now everybody's going to get an opportunity to respond to those procurements. You may not want to because you may not be capable, but you're having that opportunity. But know this in the future, any procurement that you think might go on a contract vehicle, look, and I'm not sure if Oasis, if 8A Stars, or if they can, or if any of the NITAC contract vehicles can pick and choose who they go to, but know the rules on those contract vehicles. And if you're not on those contract vehicles, you need to find partners on those contract vehicles. Also, do not rule out subcontracting opportunities. I'm going to tell you, yes, there's been some companies that have come to CMS that have gotten prime contracts. You know, first time in, they never had to sub, but that is rare. I would say that's less than 5% of the companies that come into CMS. So do not think, or do not be so arrogant that you think you can just come to CMS and prime and think you're going to win something. It rarely happens. So that's just a piece of advice to me. And don't target everyone. I've had construction companies come to me, A&E companies come to me, medical supply companies come to me. Do your research before you target an agency, and don't spread yourself thin and never say you can do everything. If that doesn't irritate me and program and contracts people, if you can do everything, then you do nothing well. So you may do a lot of things because you've grown your company, but if you're targeting CMS and you do IT, I don't want to hear that you do construction, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, and you may have a different part of your company that actually does that, and you're able to do it and do it well. But when you come to CMS, stay CMS focused. Oh, let me see what else I have. When Nate talked about his, that phase-in process of procurements, FDA has had CMS come out and do presentations. So has NIH. So look for these types of procurements more and more. USDS playbook, United States Digital Services. Google that. If you don't know the playbook and you're wanting to do work at CMS, and USDS is in a lot of government agencies. And if you're an IT company, make sure that you're following that playbook. Nate talked about PIL. More and more government agencies are using that. Know what it is. And when Nate talked about this phase-in process, how he's still learning as he's going along, a lot of COs are learning as they go along. So remember that, and be sure that you are asking those hard questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. So many times people are afraid that they may be looked at in a bad light if they don't ask the questions. Maybe by some people, but the goal is to get the best, to have the best responses, to get the best companies that are going to bring their A game to a procurement. That is so important. I can't stress it enough. Also, something that a slide that I should have put in there is don't spread yourself thin. When you get a prime contract, so many times small businesses, they'll do really well. And then they start getting, and 8As are very guilty of this. They can get sole source requirements, and they start taking them. Know when to turn down something. Know when to walk away. And another thing that I remembered is being able to retain staff. I'm familiar with many procurements recently where small businesses cannot retain their staff. And if you have a prime contract and you can't retain your staff, you have set yourself up for failure. And if you have a procurement, you have a contract where an option is not exercised, it may not go in your past performance, but your reputation is by word of mouth, and your reputation can be ruined. So CMS has even thought about putting in evaluation criteria, your ability to retain staff and key personnel. Do what you say you're going to do. Keep your word. That's important. As you grow your business, do not forget where you came from. I've seen many small businesses lately that as they've grown their business, they're acting just like they accuse large businesses of acting. They are not utilizing their subcontractors that help them get the procurement. They are not being good to their subcontractors. So don't forget where you came from. And also, as you grow your business and you're no longer small and you're going to that next step. Do you say something, Mike?
No, just let me know when you're ready for questions.
I'm almost finished.
Okay.
When you go to that next step, don't forget that now those small business rules are not applicable to you anymore. You are now a large business. So I'm going to be looking at you just like I look at other small businesses. So just as I come down on hard on larges, I will be coming down on you just as hard when you cross over if you're not following the rules. Thank you for your time. And remember to patronize your local small businesses during COVID-19 because they need your help.
Thank you, Anita. We have a few questions here for you. First question, if you're a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, is there a directory of companies or point of contacts that have been successful in doing business with CMS that may be looking for service-disabled companies to partner with? Are there live matchmaking events or facilitated network events along the industry? Okay.
So the first part of the question, the federal procurement data system, USA spending, you can do in the federal procurement data system for at least right now until they are absorbed into Beta SAM. You could do a search on service disabled, veteran-owned small businesses and drill down to HHS and then drill down to CMS and look at which small service disabled small businesses are getting prime awards. Also on Spark, SPARC, do a Google search on CMS, SP as in Paul, ARC. There is a list of vendors that are on that vehicle. Not all of those companies have gotten prime work at CMS, but some of those companies have. That is one way. The NCMA does have a lot of service disabled veteran-owned small businesses that do business at CMS and other government agencies. But I would do a search on service disabled in federal procurement data system and look at where these companies are doing business, you know, SparkSoft, Tista, Half Acre, those are just some of the three, and some of those are now large, but those are some of the ones that are popped into my head that have done some really good work in the past. And, you know, but do some research on those companies and make sure that they're companies that you want to reach out to and know what they do. Don't reach out to them because they're service disabled. Don't waste your time and don't waste their time. So that's some of the things. AFCIA, look at HubZone. Scott Denniston has a veterans organization where they do conferences every year. I think it's called the National Veterans Entrepreneur Conference. Google Scott Denniston. Don't ask me how to spell his name right now. But he has a really good organization that's really good at training service disabled companies. NCMA is a great way to network with other companies. When we do face-to-face again, that will be really good. That's all I can think of off the top of my head. There is the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce has a real good training program, and it's on the link on one of my documents that will be sent to you.
Great, thank you. Next question, where can we get a copy of the playbook you mentioned?
Which playbook are you talking about? USDS playbook? Google it. If you're talking about PIL, look at Nate's presentation. Google it. And that's something else. You need to be able to do your research. Here lately, a lot of businesses have been coming to me wanting me to do their research for them. A lot of things you can Google. That's how I find out information. These tip sheets I've learned in doing my job and Googling and going out and meeting people and accumulating all of these links and all of this information. You've got to get out there and you've got to do it. You've got to work hard. If you want to grow your business, you've got to bust your butt. So Google it.
Thank you. Next question. Does CMS or HS require certain CMMI level for IT companies?
It depends on the procurement. CMS, when I started supporting CMS in 2012, I found out that CMS has a policy in place that all IT procurements that touch payment systems, you have to be CMMI level 3. Level 4. Unless CMS waives that requirement. So what I learned is, on a previous procurement prior to Spark, it was waived for the large businesses after the contract was awarded, but not for the smalls. So the smalls had to get a CMMI level by a certain time, and the largest had to get to a CMMI level by a certain time. So what I require when I'm aware of this is that if CMS is requiring above a CMMI level 3 procurement, that it is a deliverable in the contract for the lifetime of the contract. And I can tell you that CMS pulled that requirement out and lowered it to CMI level 3 on 3 procurements that I was involved in. I can't tell CMS what is needed, but they do put in their IT procurements what is required. And I can tell you level 3 is required often, but not always. So if it doesn't state in the requirement, ask the question in writing.
Yeah, and I can add to that a little bit. it's not only CMI level 3, they require CMI level 3 for development, services, or both sometimes. And recently I've seen CMI level 3 development services and ISO 9000 in a procurement where they required all three. So it depends on the CO and the requirements of the data you're dealing with as well.
And when you see that, and if you feel it's restrictive, you need to let me know, but let me know why. I try to fight those things because my personal feeling is sometimes that stuff is put in there to exclude, not include. But sometimes CMS has presented convincing arguments to me that it's needed for specific requirements. But never be afraid to challenge or bring something to my attention or to the COs.
All right, next question. It's about the pipeline. So you will get a link to the pipeline with the information that we're going to send out after the meeting. It's in some of Anita's documents that she did not put up on the screen, but there is a link to that pipeline, and you can reference it there.
Something else that is also there for the forecast, when you go to that website, it also lists other information, and I do provide this in the attached documents. If you go to cms.gov and you scroll all the way down to the right-hand side, you can put your email address in there and hit enter, and it'll bring you to kind of a subscription screen where you can look at all of the different areas in which you can get emails that are submitted to the public. Obviously, you might want the acquisition and grants so that each time they update the forecast, you get an email. If you're an IT firm and the innovation, a lot of people want to get emails from that group. And if you start getting emails you don't want, you go back in the same way and deselect so you don't get those emails anymore.
Thank you. Next question. From a revenue perspective, do you become a large business the next year that you pass the revenue threshold, or is it averaged over a certain number of years?
Okay, as a small business, I recommend that you go to sba.gov and read the rules on how you determine the revenue. And some regulations have changed recently from 3 to 5 years. So I recommend that you go to sba.gov. Also go to your local procurement technical assistance center in order to get the 101 on how to do business. So if you Google Procurement Technical Assistance Center for your state, in Maryland, there is one in Baltimore, there's one by Maryland University, there's one, each state has one. I hear rave reviews about the one that's in Virginia at George Mason University. They have a lot of free classes. SBA has a lot of free webinars. Your local district SBA office is now going to be providing a lot of training. I would reach out to your SBA district office. Again, Google that, sba.gov district offices. And you don't need to pay a consultant or anyone thousands of dollars to learn, because there's a lot of free information out there.
Great. I think that was our last question. So with that, I'd like to thank Anita and Nathaniel for participating this morning. Leonardo, do you want to jump in here and take us out?
Sure, I will do that. And so, again, thank you, Anita and Nathaniel, for sharing with us this morning. And just as a reminder, and it's been asked, but we will be sharing the presentations as well as a couple of other handouts that Anita shared with us as well. Also, just want to bring to your attention future upcoming chamber programs that I think you would find of value and benefit. And so I'll just have those run through quickly. Later on, in about another, I guess, couple of hours, we will be having a Q&A session with County Executive Ball on opening Howard County, as well as tomorrow, we will wrap up our final session on preparing to open, as this has been part of a 5-part series that we've been having on the challenges ahead. And so we will be talking about childcare issues. We've touched on facilities management. We've talked about liability concerns, behavioral and mental health. And yesterday's focus was on education. And then also on a much lighter note, tomorrow we'll be having our screen to table, and that will be involving Hudson Coastal. And so if you like oysters, but you don't know how to shuck them, or everything else that comes along with eating and preparing oysters, join us for Screen to Table, which is tomorrow. And then the last thing that I will touch on, and I think Mike may have touched on it, but typically the Chamber has an annual cyber conference. This year, due to COVID-19, we will not be having the conference in its normal one-day capacity, but we'll be doing a series of cyber-related webinars rather, on risk management. And so our first one is coming up on June 25th, and will involve critical infrastructure. So stay tuned for that, as well as other upcoming Chamber and GovConnects events. So again, I thank you for coming out. Want to again thank our annual partners as well in Tower Federal Credit Union, Uninet, Aronson, Creatrix, Edwards Performance Solutions, HR New, Prescott HR, and Phoenix TS. So again, thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.